people are new to the faith. Some people.
Hey, Tim.
Oh, hey, buddy.
How are you?
Sitting here reading this book.
That's a good book, isn't it?
Yeah. So you came on and I'm on. I guess we'll just have one with each other, a podcast with these.
I suspect they'll be here momentarily.
Yeah, they'll be here. They'll be here.
Yes, indeed. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, good.
Let me see. Stop. I've got these bright lights on me here, and so I can't see. Rename myself here. Brad Pitt.
You're funny.
There you go.
I'm gonna name myself Michael.
Mhm. How's it going there today?
Good. We had staff development. So Bill and Jason Belcher taught on spiritual growth.
Mhm.
It's good.
Good.
Yeah.
I was thinking about by the way, it does my heart good to see Bill, you serving on the front line of the ministry like this.
Yeah. I bet.
It's something to see, and for our church too.
Well, I think that's called legacy. If I know anything about that.
Mhm. I'm
You've
thinking
got quite a
about
legacy, Tim.
Well, yeah, you're very kind. Thanks. It's it's fun to see. thinking about Sunday, if Darcy's feeling up to it. There's always a chance she won't be because she's feeling really crummy. Weak. Yeah. Maybe going out to Fountain Hills and seeing. Have you been out there yet for church?
Yeah, a few times. Yeah. Yeah, I usually do a 9 o'clock service at one of the other campuses. I'll go out there about 8 o'clock, hang out till 9:30, or maybe stay through the whole service and then come to Shea for 11.
Yeah, because I was out when Darcy was out of town. I was out at Cactus, did that one, but then we haven't been to church for 2 weeks because we were up in Montana last week on Sunday, and then the Sunday before that we traveled, and the Sunday before that Cody and Lauren were there. So actually, I haven't been to church for 3 weeks. So probably going to go to hell here if I
probably. Yeah, pretty sure bet.
Have you seen that thing on that option on the thing to blur your background? Have you seen that?
Oh yeah, should I blur mine?
I've done that. I don't need to on mine because I have this screen behind me, but
there you go. How's that?
Yeah, isn't that nice? Whoa, check it out.
I could pick a virtual background. Should I do let's do a video filter. Oh, I haven't loaded any. On my old computer at work, I had a bunch loaded. Yeah,
you got to have some stuff in there. I did a thing with, we were doing podcasts with my high school class because we had our 50th anniversary or reunion. And then we started podcasting, and I had our school in the background.
Oh, cool.
They really liked that.
Yeah, I did one with my team. I'd call it Fireside Chat with my whole product team, and it would just be kind of open mic. I'd talk about a few things and then we'd catch up. And I did a whole fireplace background and nice library setting. It was cool.
Cool. Hey, that that fund we set up called
Community Reinvestment or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
You have about 38,000 in that.
Do you really? Nice.
But the question is, can we, I put it on the agenda for us to consider moving that into the main, can the board vote to put that into the main? Well, we'll better pay attention here. There she is. Hey.
Hi, it's so nice to meet you.
Well, likewise.
Hey, Christa.
One quick second. Let me fix something.
She's fixing stuff.
Okay, Christa. Hey, Christa, I have to ask you, are you related in any way to Rita Neidig?
Rita Neidig. That one doesn't sound familiar, but there's not too many Neidigs out there.
There aren't. No, I work with her
like
for
I need
years.
to trace that one down.
Yeah, I work with her at American Express, and she was a very successful head of account development there. And when I saw your last name, it's the only two people I've ever seen with that last name.
Yes, I recently actually married into this last name as of May. So we're only about 7 months in. So
there you go. Well, congratulations.
Thank
you. There you go.
Thank you. Where are y'all located at?
We're in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah. Both of us are, although he's over at Scottsdale Bible Church and I'm at our ministry office. So
that's great. Yes, because you're with Grace-Based Families, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Are you in Houston?
I am in Houston. I believe we just did a comp report for your organization a few weeks ago. I saw the logo, and I'm on the manage the marketing team. So when I saw that one, I remembered it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was impressed because the last time we did it, it was like 4 years ago or something like that, three or 4 years ago. And I filled out all the stuff, and you all evaluated us like we were a church. And the problem with us is that, man, none of the questions made any sense to us. And then finally, I got the right person on the phone. They said, "Oh, we have another way of doing you guys." And
actually, you got really lucky timing wise because we just launched our nonprofit compensation this year. And I feel like it's because of conversations we had with people like you when we realized we need a different way to do this, something that works a little bit better.
Yeah, there are a lot of 501c3 Christian organizations that are not churches, and I think the big demand for you guys was the churches there, but now you guys are you're the name, you're the brand.
We feel very lucky to be here.
So are you being punished? Is that why you're being forced to interview us too?
No, not at all. Not at all. This is the fun part of my job. I like when I get to step away and step into this room and meet new people. I think it's a blast. I believe y'all are working with Pamela McCure with the publishing company, and she's great. She's always sending me amazing people and new books, and I think this would be a good fit. And so when you came across my email, and especially after seeing Grace-Based Families, I was like, oh, we have to do this one.
We work with these guys. Yeah. Well, you also work with Scottsdale Bible Church.
Yeah.
We
you
do
did.
actually. When I heard you say that, I was like, I recognize that name.
Yep.
Yeah. He just joined their staff there. And I've been serving on the elder board I was their first youth pastor a long time ago. I think it was before Michael or you were born, but it was a long time ago.
So I'm assuming that's your connection to each other is Scottsdale Bible.
It is, yeah, that's where we met. Tim was
You
teaching.
might want to pursue that in one of your questions.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good story.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your podcast and kind of what you're expecting, and we don't want to screw this up too badly.
You will be fine, I promise. So usually I tell people we used to say an average commute time is what we shoot for, which was 20 to 25 minutes. William always jokes now that nobody commutes. So what is a commute time?
Yeah.
So we still shoot for about 20 to 25-minute conversation. We'll start in a few minutes. I'll pause, give it a break, and then I'll start, and we'll cut off the beginning of this conversation. We have an amazing editing team. So if you mess anything up, just stop and then re-say the whole sentence, and they can chop out the part that was messed up. Like, no big deal.
Great.
Yes. I'll start with kind of an introduction of the two of you. I'll thank you for being here. And then I think I'm going to start with mentioning kind of we've worked with Grace-Based Families and we've worked with Scottsdale Bible Church. And I want to know kind of how the two of you know each other and have decided to co-write this book. And you can kind of talk on that. And then if the other one of you wants to kind of I'll ask for like a overall, maybe your 30-second kind of spiel of the book, just so listeners who aren't familiar with it can know what it's about. And then from there, I have a list of questions that Pamela sent over that I really liked, and I was going to pull some of those if y'all felt comfortable with that.
We feel fine.
We are well versed in how to talk about those questions.
Yeah, there you go.
Great. And I'll try to add some commentary in there and make it a little bit more interesting than just following a script, of course.
Sure. Tell us a little bit about you too and your background. How'd you get these guys? Yeah.
From Houston, I went to Texas A&M, and
no, stop.
I was
He's a
like,
Longhorn.
Yours that you were from UT, which is
Hook 'em horns.
Both of my in-laws,
Yeah.
they live in Houston, and they both went to UT. They have 5 kids, and they got 3 Baylor Bears, and then an A&M, and now they have 2 A&M in their family, and they were like, we did nothing right.
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
Had to go there.
Punishment.
I have a son that went to A&M.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's great. Well,
Yeah,
love it.
This ought to be wild.
But I went to A&M, studied business there, marketing, and then also nonprofit and social innovation. And kind of applied both of those knowledges to Vanderbloemen. I started originally with Vanderbloemen in 2020 and then worked up from intern to marketing coordinator, senior coordinator, and then stepped into manager position this year in about August is when I stepped over. So that's kind of been.
So if they say like, if you'll legally change your last name to Vanderbloemen, they'll give you the whole thing, would you probably do it? No, probably not.
Well, honestly, I would joke with William because he always says he's really partial to last names because a lot of people don't know how to say Vanderbloemen. And I was like, I don't think Neidig is much better. My parents still cannot say my new last name. So
Really? Funny.
I have had to sit down and break it down for them. They just can't get it.
That's funny. Neidig, right?
Neidig, close, kind of like dig a hole.
Neidig.
You got it.
Wow. That is interesting. I never heard that one. All right, I'm looking for your name on my notes here, but I don't even see it. Oh, well.
Perfect.
Well, let's have fun.
Old Zoom thing. And then Michael, how long have you been in your position?
I've been in this position now close to going on 6 months.
Okay, great. And what's the title again?
It's pastor of Central Ministries.
Central Ministries.
Yep.
Got it.
And my last name's pronounced Tooker.
Tooker. So Michael Tooker, and is it Tim Kimmel?
Tim Kimmel, yeah. Yeah, and by the way, the credibility that Michael brings to this book is the years, the decades he spent in the marketplace, in a very competitive marketplace, secular world. So, he just moved into the church. He worked with our nonprofit for 4 years, but other than that, he's been out there dodging bullets.
That'll be great. We'll make sure to mention that. We'll do kind of, this is actually going to go out in January, right after the holidays. And so we'll put kind of some bio information and be sure to include that on the website. We'll do social media for it, and we'll tag both of you and your organizations and make sure to promote that.
Great.
And yeah, and the two links are graceatworkbook.com. They can go there and order the book there, or they can go to Amazon.
Perfect. And then actually that led me into my last thing I wanted to note before we get started. I'll wrap up and thank you two for being here for the podcast. And then I'll ask, my last question will be, where can listeners get their hands on their own copy? And you can mention those links. That would be great.
Great. She says she's going to thank us at the end. She has no idea. She might say, good stinking riddance.
They just end the call.
You guys need
Just do it.
therapy.
Just do a Control-Alt-Delete on this file.
Call that a podcast? Okay.
Y'all are fun. I enjoy this. I always like it when there's multiple. I feel like conversation's more fun this way.
Yeah.
Great. Is there anything else before we get started that you want to make sure I include or say or kind of ask towards?
No,
I think
there's a problem in quantum physics that have just stumped me for a long, wait, let's not go there.
You two are easy. This is going to be great.
No, we're fine. I'm glad you're an Aggie though, because this is
I know some people will ask me still if they see my ring, because I feel like I Zoom with a lot of people all over, and they're like, what's that one? I was like, well, I promise it's a big deal in Texas.
It's a big deal.
Else may not
it is. I was up in Anchorage, Alaska, and I was speaking up there, and I brought the family up. Cody, our son that went to A&M, he had gotten his ring. He was still at A&M, but you know how you get it before you're done. And we were in the airport. And I mean, this guy's across the terminal, and they just looked and
knew.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. It's kind of idolatrous. It's weird.
Something like that. Colt like
there's nothing more idolatrous than Aggie football. They're crazy.
Goodness gracious. Don't even get me started about this season.
Yeah, it's been a rough one.
This is a tune-up. We're calling this a tune-up season next year.
My husband always says the thing about being an Aggie fan that's so heartbreaking is every year you think it's the year. Like you think you can do it because you're kind of in the middle. You don't know if it's going to be bad or if it's going to be really good. And it has the potential to go either way. And it honestly varies by week. And so you just build up this hope every year just to be let down a little bit.
Well, I think the Reveillees all voted from the grave to have their cemetery moved away from the stadium and the scoreboard. They're just embarrassed. They don't want anything to do with this.
It's funny.
Michael probably doesn't understand that. Reveille is their mascot, their dogs.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Perfect. I even have my copy of the book here, so I'm all ready to go.
You're set.
I love when they send me the little first editions.
There you go.
All right, I'm going to pause and then we'll get started. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. I am so excited because I get to talk with Tim Kimmel and Michael Tooker. They are co-authors of their new book, Grace at Work, and we get to talk all about it today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks so much for having us, Christa. We're excited to be with you.
Of course. Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone and kind of let us know your connection to each other and why you co-authored this book.
You go first, Michael.
Okay, I'm Michael Tooker, and Tim and I met about almost 20 years ago now. And I can give you the story on that here in a minute. But by way of maybe quick background, I've spent the last nearly 30 years in the marketplace in a variety of positions, and then made a major career decision to change, kind of shift horses here about 6 months ago, and joined the Scottsdale Bible Church as their pastor of Central Ministries. And so just again, excited to be here with you. And Tim, why don't you tell them who you are?
Well, when I went into ministry, the burden that God put on my heart is that the Christian movement seemed to have a bit of a blind spot when it came to God's active applied grace lived out day to day in relationships. We understood the role that grace plays in getting us into, out of our sin and into heaven, but we just kind of left it there at the foot of the cross. And I hope I'm not talking too much Jesus stuff here, but I said, no, it's supposed to wash over us and redefine us and become the defining feature of how we treat each other. And so that's what I've spent my life doing is figuring out, what does God's grace look like lived out in the real life, in your face world of close relationships like marriage and parenting, grandparenting, extended family, and church. And then Michael came along, and God used him to say, what would this look like if we took this into the marketplace?
Mm-hmm. That's great. And Michael, I believe you were with the same organization with Grace-Based Families for about 4 years. Is that right?
Well, that's true. I was there kind of in the middle of my career. I had a bit of a detour, which if now's a good time, I can kind of give you a view of how Tim and I came to meet. Because quite frankly, the way we came to meet is ultimately became kind of the reason we wrote this book together. So the way we came together was I was at the time, this was back in early 2000s, like 2002, 3, 4, kind of in that range, was working at a Fortune 50 company, climbing through the ranks, doing what you're supposed to do, particularly as a young man out of graduate school, climbing the corporate ladder, accumulating more responsibility, larger staff, bigger paychecks, all that stuff. And I was a non-believer at the time, chasing after kind of the trappings of success and the trappings of the world, and was by outward appearances very successful. But what was happening kind of behind the scenes in my marriage and just in my life was things were just starting this slow kind of meltdown. And as I describe it, when Tim and I met, he was teaching a marriage enrichment class, and my wife and I stumbled in on the verge of divorce. Marriage was on fire, and it was kind of the dumpster fire, car fire variety of fire. And shortly after meeting Tim, that's when I started learning in this class, like, what is God's grace and who is God just at all? And what are his desires and expectations for a life well lived as a follower of Christ? And so I came to Christ about 6 months after meeting Tim. And what I then realized over the ensuing, decade or so was just, man, this God is a powerful God who has just incredible, kind of expectations and hopes and desires for our lives. And what I realized was this pursuit of the world, pursuit of success, this chasing of things in the workplace, it just kind of it was just a grind, right? And it just kind of wore me out. And as I was chasing these things and getting more success, as it were, what was happening was I was growing distant from my wife. I was growing distant from my friends. I was abandoning my health. I was just kind of singularly focused on myself and my own success. And the byproduct of that was just a kind of, as I describe it in the book, my plane just fell from the sky. And what I then subsequently learned was, man, I'm not the only person this has happened to. It's a tragically common story of people doing what they think they're supposed to do in regards to work, and at some point realizing it's bankrupt. And that's much of it was my own kind of stupid decisions and my own falling prey to those things. But at the end of the day, I realized, man, this notion of God's grace and the way Tim has unpacked a model of applied grace in relationships had such a radical ability to transform my marriage, transform my relationship with my kids, my friends. And that's when we started to talk about, hey, what would this look like in the workplace? Because the workplace is another place full of relationships, and they're just pressure cooked relationships, and they really need that injection of God's grace. And so that was kind of how we came to know each other, and what was the spark, if you will, to fuel the fire for this book.
That's great. I think I think this book is really great because you're right. At the very end of that, you mentioned those pressure cooked relationships, and there's nothing like working next to someone 40 hours a week to get to see everything. We talked about this. We had our Christmas party last week at Vanderbloemen, and we have the spouses come. And it was funny. Jess, someone who sits on our sales team, sits right next to me, and so she could probably talk to my husband, and both of them know every single stress habit, everything by watching up close. And I think you're right. Like it takes an added level of grace. So I'm excited to talk about this book and this concept of what it looks like to bring grace to the workplace. Do y'all want to dive into that for me?
Sure. I can summarize this book in one sentence. And this book is simply about treating the people you work with the way God treats you. That's all it's about. And but that does not come naturally to any of us any more than it comes naturally to us when it comes to our marriage and our kids, because we all have a self-protective thing about us, and our guard's up, and we can play the game that people dish out to us. We can throw it right back. But God said, that's not how I treat you. And I want you to just take this grace that I'm showing to you, and I want you to take that to work with you. And this is just about taking Jesus' heart to work with you. Let me tell you what it's not about. This book is not a book about how to go to work and evangelize everybody, or invite them to your church or start a Bible study. I suppose there's places for that. This is a book about going to work and loving the people you work with. Here's why we need this, because there's a lot of people we work with that are very hard to love, and they don't necessarily love us back. And work can be smash mouthing, cutthroat, and backstabbing, and some people are just absolute nightmares, and sometimes they're in charge, and yet that's our job. What we find interesting is that how our work arena, how much it has in common with our families, and that first of all, we spend the bulk of our time between those two things, either our family or work. And other than our spouse, we don't get to choose any of the people in the picture. They just become the people we're stuck with, one way or the other. But God says, this is exactly where I want my heart to shine through you. And so we said, well, let's put this act of grace to work in this book and show people how to get a whole lot more from their job than a paycheck.
That's great. So let's kind of backtrack, and you talk about loving others the way God loves us. So how do we prioritize our relationship with God, and how does that impact our ability to live these grace-filled lives?
Yeah, I would maybe start with a couple thoughts. And Tim, I know you've got some great thoughts on this as well, is what many people do, particularly, let's say, a Christian who works in a secular company, they compartmentalize, right? And there's a place for God, and that place for God is Sunday. It's not even all day Sunday necessarily. Let's call it Sunday morning, right? So there's that place where God is part of their life.
You got to have room for the NFL in the afternoon.
Well, exactly.
Like
and,
that.
yeah, and
Not if you're in Houston and a Texans fan.
Absolutely. So I think that's maybe the first thought there, is that the way I would think about your faith, and the way Tim and I talk about your faith directly in the book, is, God is not somebody that you just, go worship on Sunday. God should permeate every facet of your life, right? It should be, God in your marriage, God in your children, God in your work, God in your health. So that effectively, if you look through every element of your life through the lens of God and his son Jesus and what he's done for us, it should transform every facet of your life, as opposed to just being a compartment of your life. And so I think that's the big thing. And when you talked about that idea of love, Christa, love's a tricky word to use in the workplace. But Tim and I Tim has a great definition for it, and we talk a whole lot about what does it look like to love the people you work with. So Tim, why don't you maybe share that definition of love with the listeners?
Yeah, because we use this word so broadly that many times it loses its punch. But it helps if we pin it down. Here's the definition that we put forth in the book that we want to bring to work. Love is the commitment of my will to your needs and best interests, regardless of the cost. And that is the cost to me. So I'm coming to work and here's whatever, my boss, my coworkers, whatever. And God said, I want you to commit your will to their needs and best interests, regardless of the cost to you, because it might cost us putting our pride where it belongs, behind us, and putting our personal agendas and putting our selfish desires where they belong, behind us, and putting God's heart out front.
And that's a really important point that we really unpack in the book, Christa, because if I look at my story, and again, you go back to why did I write this book? I think what many of your listeners right now would say, if they were completely honest with you, they would say, hey, I have this low grade or high grade discontent as it relates to my job. I get up every day, I go into work, and I'm trying to get something from my job, and it's not delivering. And I'm trying to get a sense of purpose, a sense of fulfillment. I'm trying to get wealthy. I'm trying to get a sense of identity and a job and a title and all these things, right, that we're trying to extract from it. And the problem is that's all self-centered. That's all focused on the commitment of my will to me and my job and how it can deliver to me. And so the whole crux of this book is that when you start to say my job is not about me and what I can get from it, because that's not what God designed work to be. Instead, it's, hey, what can I bring to work? And Tim talked about I can bring the active presence of Christ and his grace working through me to serve other people and to love other people. Two things happen when you do that. One is everything around you gets better. Because when you show up to work that way, so when I think about some of my jobs where I've had a staff of a couple hundred people or a small staff of a dozen or whatever, if I'm serving my staff that way, it's a better culture. It's a better place to work where I'm bringing out the best in everyone around me. And the second thing is, if I'm bringing out the best in everyone around me, the byproduct is I have a greater sense of purpose. So that thing that the job could never give me was a sense of purpose. It starts to deliver that to me, not because I'm hijacking it from the job, but because I'm serving that company and those people. And as a byproduct, I start to enjoy a sense of, wow, everything around me is better. And that gives me a sense of purpose. And that's a big part of what we unpack in this book is, how do you do that?
Yeah, changing that mindset. I think that's really great. This morning when I was reading and prepping actually for this podcast, I read one of you wrote that somewhere and I came across it and I like stopped and I grabbed my coworker, Kaylee, my coordinator. I was like, listen to this. This is so monumental, because we quickly make it about ourselves. And we think, what can we get out? And it's so much more than that. It's what can we put in and what can others get out of our presence being here. In the book, you mentioned there's like these 6 traits of grace at work. What are those, just kind of in brief summary? I don't want to give away too much from the book, but I think these are really good things to mention.
Yeah, we look at these things almost like core muscles, like a 6-pack that really gives you the strength and the resilience to bring God's grace to work. And they are faith, integrity, poise, disciplines, endurance, and courage. And those are all muscles that God wants to reinforce us with, so that when we walk into the workplace, where many times there's a lot of compromise being thrown at us. There's situations, there's dialogue, there's conversations, there's gossip, there's all kinds of toxic junk that's going on around us. And we need to have the kind of strength, the internal strength that comes from God's power and presence in our life to know how to sift our way through that without being some obnoxious, self-righteous nightmare. Because this is not about going and pushing Jesus on anybody. This is, I mean, sometimes leading with your Christianity at work can be a big turn off to not only everybody there, but sometimes some of the other Christians. What they need to see is people that come to work and they genuinely care about the company. They genuinely care. They work hard. They're responsible. Their word is good, and they're aware of what's going on in the people's lives around them, and they want to be an ally and an asset to the best interests of everybody in their sphere of influence. Well, who's that sound like? It doesn't, by the way, it doesn't necessarily sound like Christa or Tim or Michael. but it sounds exactly like how Jesus was.
Right.
When he was just going around fishing or just walking around with people, and people just credited him because he cared about the people that he was in contact with. Well, why should we be anything less if if the work he did for us on the cross, we have a chance now to go and be that light and that salt in the midst of a work arena.
Yeah, I think you're hinting on this, but my next question was how Christians should prioritize work within the scope of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, there's a lot to that, Christa, but I think for one, God called us to work, right? I mean, that was part of his original design was, in the garden, he didn't create man along with the sofa and an Xbox, right? He created man, and then he had appointed them work to do. And he asked us to find joy in that work. And so I think part of it is we as Christians should kind of relish in the fact that we've been created by our Creator to work. That's part of his design for us, and to find joy in that work. And it's not his creation that was wrong. It was the fall that distorted that. And I think that's where as believers we have to appreciate that. So much of our views of work get torqued because of the fall and because of culture, and what does the world around us, what does music say, what does movies say, what do TVs and Netflix and all these streaming services, and what does culture say about work? And there's so many different views. I mean, there's the view of you should be the workaholic and you should, work like that should be your singular pursuit. And the byproduct should be wealth and prosperity and, extravagance. Or then there's the other side of it, which is, well, I shouldn't work. I should find a way to, retire and have an easy life, at a young age. And so all those views are wrong. But I think one of the things that what I would hope for all of your listeners and all of our readers of this book is when they put the book down, one of the things that they would say is, and feel really convicted of, is when my company looks around and says, who are the top workers at our company, they should look at you as a Christian and say, that's one of our best workers. And why would we consider them to be one of our best workers? It's because of the way they're there to serve others, and they're people of deep character, and they're there to serve other people, and they do their jobs with excellence, and they find joy in their work, right? That's what we would want people around us to say. But I think a lot of Christians have to say, just like hold up the mirror and do an honest reflection and say, is that how my workplace views me? And I don't think a lot of Christians would be viewed that way in their workplace. And so that is part of what we're trying to say is you should be a standout employee at your company. If you're a Christian and if you're bringing God's active grace to work, you should be shining in that workplace like no one else.
I like that. I think that's really great. Someone pointed out to me the other day, which I had not really thought of, was that work is biblical and work came before the fall, which means it's good. Yeah. And there was good and perfect work before the fall. Mm-hmm. And we tend to only think of work after the fall, but it is good and it's very biblical. I want to talk a little bit more tangibles as far as fostering a grace-filled workplace or creating that. How can leaders and how can managers create that kind of workspace?
That's a great question. And you're talking about the crux of the book. The center piece of it is we unpack for everybody a way to create a culture of grace where you work, an atmosphere of grace. Now, I might be just a low person on the food chain, on the payroll food chain, and so I'm not in a position of influence and boss and all that stuff. But in my little world, I can do it. But if I am a supervisor, or I am a manager, or I'm a VP, or I own the company, just think how much you could do that. Well, we show that what that's like, and we basically take grace at 4 levels. We unpack how we can be used by God to use our words and actions to address the 3 driving inner needs that everybody that we work with have inside them. Every one of us have, everybody listening. has a need to know that they're secure, that they need to know they're significant. They need to know they're strong or sufficient for the moment they're in. Well, we can use our words and actions, and we show you in the book exactly how that plays out in grace. The second thing is, and this really brings the best out of people, is you set your fellow workers' hearts free. And there's 4 wonderful freedoms that God gives you and me in his grace, that when we turn around and be vessels for that to others, it changes everything. And that is giving people the freedom to be different. And by the way, give me synonyms for that: weird, bizarre, strange, goofy, quirky. We don't make issues that we sell given the freedom to be different. Vulnerable. There's a lot of fragile people. The freedom to be candid. They can tell you what's on their heart, even if it's stuff that's hard to hear. And the freedom to be imperfect. They're going to make some mistakes, but we're going to get through that. The third level has to do with those 6 character traits you talked about, and how we bring this strength to work with us. And then the fourth way grace plays itself out is where we're aiming our lives as individuals, and how that impacts everybody around them. Because see, if we're a follower of Jesus, if we're a follower of the world, then we should be aiming our life at success. Well, if you're aiming your life at success, you're aiming very low. Jesus offers something better in the Bible. And that what we call true greatness. And Jesus would have defined true greatness. You can take verses he gave, you can come up with something. It's the passionate love for him that shows itself in an unquenchable love and concern for the people around you. There's 4 wonderful qualities of it. Look at this: humility, gratefulness, generosity, and a servant spirit. Now you take those 4 things to work with you, and I guarantee you something. Not only are you going to make that work environment so much better for everybody else, but you're going to be noticed by the people that decide who's going to run the show. And the people that I want making the big decisions at work are people that are humble, that they're grateful, they're generous heart, and they're very servant-hearted. Those are the people I want they're going to trust I can put the reputation of our business in their hands, my fellow workers in their hands. I could put the assets of the business in their hands, and know I've got a good person. So there's far more in this for the individual that reads the book and practices this than even the people on the receiving end of it.
Yeah, and Christa, just to put an exclamation point on all those things that Tim just shared. Right. So if you asked the question about culture, and culture is really, you can talk about, there's a lot of ingredients into culture. But as opposed to it being things like color of the paint, the furniture, the whatever, it's really the culture of a company is the sum total of all the interactions between the people of that company. And what Tim just described is, imagine if you came to work. If I come to work as a leader of 200 people, and I'm dealing with everyone around me in that way, or I come to work as just an individual contributor, who's a frontline, service worker, let's say, and I treat the people around me in that way, don't you think the culture of the company is going to be better? Right. And so part of what we highlight for our readers of the book is that this is all about kind of relational capital and how do we deal with each other in the workplace. And that ingredient, right, is God's grace should be that active ingredient, that catalyst that changes how we deal with everyone in the workplace. But that's ultimately what a culture is the sum total of all those relationships and all those interactions between people. And so that's our hope for our readers, is that they take those 4 different levels and say, okay, that's the blueprint for how I should treat the people around me.
And can I say, Christa, that this raises the stock value of a corporate setting big time, because right now there's a lot of people, they use this terminology, the great resignation, that a lot of people are quitting and all, and then there's a new response to the great resignation, and that's the great firing. Okay, you don't really like working here, then fine, you're gone. Well, this is bad for everybody. When you create a culture of grace, you are raising the relational stock value of your company, where the people working there are far more inclined to want to keep working there and to work harder, to work better. It's better for your customers. It's better It's better for your reputation. Everybody wins with this. And this book unpacks for people. This is kind of the first time it's been able to be unpacked in such a way that said, this is what Jesus' heart looks like. In other words, what if Jesus actually worked for Vanderbloemen? Or what if he worked for, pick the name, he worked for AT&T, or he worked for Google, or he worked, name these. What if he worked there? Do you think those would be better places for all the other people working there? And the answer is, of course it would. Now, here's the good news. He's saying to us, hey, I don't need to work there because you do. And I'm in you. Just take me with you and watch what happens.
That's good. Going even further, I think, down this road, we talked about how grace is, I think the way you phrased it was like the outward focus on meeting other people's needs, regardless of the cost to yourself, regardless of that selfishness aspect. What does that look like in a workplace?
Can I give you the definition, another definition of grace, then Michael can respond to that. We like to say it, grace is giving somebody something they desperately need, but don't necessarily deserve.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we all need that. And when we come to work, and we're actually on the receiving end of that by somebody else, that has a huge impact on us. And Michael can elaborate on what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, Christa, a really important point that Tim and I make in the book that I want to make now is workplaces are hard, gritty, messy, tough places. We all know that, right? Because we all are in them. And whether it's a big company, small company, individual, proprietorship, or publicly traded, it makes no difference. It's a collection of humans that come together. And whenever you get humans together, it gets messy, right? And so I like to think about it as you don't need as much grace when everything's running perfectly well between people. If the company's making a lot of money and they're landing new clients and everybody's happy and there's no missed orders or whatever, everyone's happy and there's not a lot of relational tension. But grace is really where you really need it is when things start to get choppy and dicey. And one of the points we make in our book is that, look, grace is not soft. It's not pushover. It's not permissive or licentious. Grace is actually it's a very hard-nosed thing. Because where grace has to show up, when you think about all those things that Tim described, those 17 different facets of it, imagine, like, if I think about the highlight reel of my career of all the dysfunctionality and that unfold in front of me, it's, what did I do to the guy who literally in a meeting with 4 people, all of a sudden started screaming at one of my employees and just kind of ripping him a new one, so to speak. Well, it was like, hold on, time out. We don't talk to each other that way. Like we're going to stop this meeting right now and we're going to have a conversation about what's going on between the two of you, because we have to, that can't be like permissible for us to talk to each other this way. Or if I have to terminate people, one of the most powerful moments of my career was when I had to terminate a Marine. And as I'm walking him out to the parking lot, he said, hey, you know what? This is a bad day for me. I got to go home and tell my wife that I don't have a job. And I don't know how I'm going to do that. But what I know is, of all the people in the company, I'm glad, Michael, that you were the one to have this conversation with me and you were the one to walk me to my car, because I know you care for me. Mm-hmm. Right. And so part of what this notion of grace is, it's like, we got to do hard stuff. And oftentimes the world, they push those hard things away and don't do them. They brush them under the rug, or they do them so poorly, they inflict just a massive amount of damage on people in their midst. So as believers, we have to be the ones to wade into the hardest situations. And the way we wade in is just like Christ would wade in. We do the hard work, but we do it well. We do it with grace. And we recognize that, there but for the grace of God go I. So if I'm confronting somebody who's awful, well, that could be me tomorrow. So I do that in such a way that they experience the love of Christ, that I'm kind, I'm merciful, but I'm firm. And I'm direct, and I deal with those difficult things that other people are unwilling to deal with.
This is so great. Michael and Tim, thank you so much for spending time, not only to write this book that I think is going to be so monumental in workplaces, but also just to have this conversation with me. Where can listeners get their hands on this book?
There's 2 ways. They can go to graceatworkbook.com. and they can order it there. And by the way, this is an interesting book because we're not used to selling it by the case, but now companies are buying it and churches are buying it and staffs and so forth. The other way is go to Amazon and then get the Kindle version, the audio version, or the printed version. So graceatworkbook.com or Amazon.
That's great. Thank you so much. And we'll make sure to link both of those on the show notes for you. Thanks again, guys. I really appreciate this conversation.
Well, hey, Christa, thank you for having us, and thanks for allowing us to be guests, but also thanks to Vanderbloemen for the great work that you do. We're also clients of yours, so thank you for the work that your company does.
Of course. Great. Thank you so much, guys. That'll be wonderful.
Hey, I have a question that I should have asked at the beginning. Do you do just the audio or the audio and the video?
We'll do a little bit of both. So we'll do the audio for the podcast for the all of anywhere you get a podcast, and then we'll pull some clips of the video for social media.
Okay, because I wondered, because I'm kind of glad, we put the blur on behind us and put the right lighting on, because because I kept looking and saying, by the way, are they watching us?
Well, so, I should have mentioned that at the beginning, so I'm sorry about that. I need to add it to my little spiel when we start.
I don't believe I picked my nose, but if I did, if your editors could cut that out,
edit it out. No worries.
Yeah, they edited it out. Well, thanks, Christopher. Michael and I really appreciate you guys giving me your time, and we really are really glad Vanderbloemen does what it does.
Absolutely.
And of course, reach out if you ever need anything from us. We'd be happy to help.
Well, thanks. And tell your boss man, I've never met him, but thanks for he and his wife. We just appreciate what they put together. So, okay.
Of course. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Christa.
Bye-bye.